Hello, and a very warm welcome to Professor Daniel Solove, a very experienced privacy expert, author, and professor at George Washington University Law School. It's such a pleasure to have you join us all the way from Washington for our Project Bijou Week. I came across your books some years ago. They really do still stand out to me as being some of the most relevant works in this area. And have helped me personally to navigate this increasingly complex legal, moral, and indeed ethical landscape. I'm very keen to hear about your most recent publication, which looks wonderful, very exciting. But first, can I ask you what it was about data and privacy that, as an academic and as a professor of law, first piqued your interest and led to the very rich array of work that you now do in this space?
Thanks so much for having me here today. I got interested in privacy when I was in law school in the late 1990s, actually mid to late 90s. At that point, the internet was just starting to become a commercial thing that was really starting to take off. And I was really fascinated by the issues that it raised. In particular, privacy was an issue that at the time was barely explored. There were a handful of people writing on it. There were a handful of articles on it, but very little attention to it. And I remember thinking this is going to be a really interesting, important issue. I thought it would be a great idea for a paper. I was planning to write a paper on that and then move to other things. There wasn't a lot to read. I read everything there was to read. I wrote the paper, which I really enjoyed writing. And then I discovered along the way that actually there's a lot more here than I thought there was. There's more than one paper. In fact, that paper wound up becoming a little too big. So I split it into two papers. Ultimately, that got split into more papers. And actually, what was originally in the first paper became my first two books. A lot more in this rabbit hole. And then since then, I kept exploring the issues. And with every year, more and more things kept happening, new developments. The field grew. Now, what's amazing is before, when I started, I was considered a very narrow specialist, writing on a very narrow topic. And now, today, I'm considered a generalist because I focus on a lot of different topics on privacy. And it's so big that people are specialized in different areas. I can't keep up with all the academic articles and news articles and articles by practitioners and all the books and volumes of material being produced. It is amazing how much is being written on this field. And I just remember, being able to read everything. And if an article came out on privacy, it was a big event. And now, more comes out in a day than I can keep up with. So it's grown tremendously, and it's kept my interest because the issues change so rapidly and still stay very relevant and interesting. So it is very much like, I feel like, Alice going into the rabbit hole and not being able to, find a way out.
I have sympathy with that, but it's a good rabbit hole to be down, huh? Okay, you've written quite a few studies and you've authored a number of books around contemporary privacy issues. You've recently turned your writing skills to publishing a book specifically for children. Can you tell us a little bit about that book and importantly, the role, as you see it, that storytelling can play in encouraging better engagement, better awareness, especially for the younger generations, and why you think that's so important?
Absolutely. This was a fun project that I've been really wanting to do for a long time. I brought the book here. It's called The Eyemonger. It's a children's book about privacy, and it's designed to teach children about the value of privacy, why privacy is important. My son, who is now 10, as he was growing up, I read him a lot of children's books and told him a lot of stories. And one of the things that I found to be missing was there was very little about uh, the value of privacy and also just generally about the issues that we're facing these days in in a highly technological world where so much technology is watching us. So I thought that it would really be helpful to provide something for children to educate them about this. So this book is designed to it's about a character named the Eyemonger. Um, he's actually a well-meaning person. He's actually kind of a creature. You can see him here in this scene, um, and the book is it's a long poem, and it's about how he promises everybody greater security if he can watch all the time. And one thing that he does is he becomes obsessed with his watching, and he brings these flying eyeballs that fly and spy on everybody. And he says that this is essential to keep people safe. But unfortunately, this also stifles people's sense of comfort and their ability to create the need for solitude, the need for not being watched all the time, and ultimately there's at the end a confrontation with a character named Griffin. I put my son into the book. My illustrator did a fantastic job capturing my son in this book, um, and uh, I won't give away the ending, but the book is really designed to teach children in a fun, interesting, memorable way why privacy is a value that needs to be protected, and it really matters that people understand the importance of this value, or else it will not be protected in the future.
That leads me to a question I think vexes a lot of us in the data protection privacy field is data protection as a concept doesn't always have the easiest of rides. Why is it you think that we as individuals and societies and cultures often find it quite hard to comprehend or engage with what I think are the very real harms that arise from misuse, manipulation, etc., of our personal data? Why is it we find that so difficult?
I think there are a number of reasons. Privacy is a very complex concept. It's actually many different things. One of the books I wrote was a book called Understanding Privacy, and just trying to make sense of what privacy is because there's so many different attempts to define it. And ultimately, my conclusion was that privacy is many different things. It's actually protection against many different types of problems. And um, one of the challenges that we face is that a lot of privacy violations are hidden. Companies are uh, finding ways to surveil people without people knowing how much information is being gathered, without people really feeling the effects of it. And so, with modern technology, it's so easy to live in a world where the context is changed, where you don't perceive it. So an example is actually the technology we're using now. Here I am, I'm being recorded. Also, I could, be being broadcast in a public way around the world. Yet it feels like I'm talking to one person, or I could just be, talking to my computer, making a video, writing something online, and it feels like it's just between me and the computer, but in fact, it's widespread. And in so many instances, it's hard to really um, uh, feel that because the context is gone. If I were standing on a public stage, I would certainly feel differently than if I'm in my room like I am. So these make it harder for people to really, feel the context of privacy. And then what also makes it tricky is that the algorithms being used to make decisions about people are also incredibly complicated and very hard to explain and understand. That the patterns can be seen in data based on an algorithm looking at all sorts of people and what their buying patterns are and what their behavioral patterns are, and then making inferences about other people based on the collective information of that matches certain patterns that I have. This is very hard to explain, and also very hard for me as a person to understand the implications of giving up my information. If I give up these pieces of information, which I think may be pretty innocuous, okay, this is the product I like to buy, this is the type of soft drink I like to drink, these are the books I might read, a few books, and here's a few movies I like. And I give this information out thinking, okay, that's not a big deal. But if from that, an algorithm can start making all sorts of inferences about my life and reveal things about me that I might not want to be revealed or expect to be revealed, or make decisions about me that could have an impact on my life that I'm not expecting. If for some reason you say, well, the people who read these books and do this are likely to engage in riskier behavior and drive too fast. And therefore, based on that, my car insurance rates go up. I'm like, whoa, I didn't expect that. But a lot of these consequences are happening in the background with people having very little understanding of this, very little ability to affect or have any degree of control over it. And that's a problem in with the direction that our society is going in, and with the increasing use of algorithms to analyze data and make decisions about people.
You talked before about how when you first started in this field, it was quite a lonely place to be, and we now are in a field, an environment where there is a lot more interest, and you do a lot of work supporting organizations to get this stuff right, I think, from a legal as well as an ethical perspective, from the work that I know that you do. So give us your top tips for businesses listening, but also, if you can, it's a little bit more challenging, I know, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about what individual citizens can contribute to this wider discussion, if we can at all.
I think that, I think I'll preface what I say by saying I think individual rights are very important, that, individuals be given the right to access their information, the right to have their information deleted if they don't want companies to have it, the right to correct their information. I think all these things are good things, but they're not enough. And I think that, they don't scale because there are hundreds, if not thousands of companies that have our data. And it's one thing to manage my privacy with one or two companies, but to manage them across 1,000 and to understand what information they're gathering and what the potential problems and harms are going to be and what I should do. Is the security any good? That becomes really complicated for me to do. So it's very important that someone be looking out for people, that we need good regulation, regulators that are making sure that things stay within the guardrails, that something isn't too harmful, that certain problematic uses of information don't happen, that the data security that is provided is good, because the average consumer is not going to be able to evaluate whether or not data security is going to be good or bad. There's not enough information out there to make that decision for consumers and to evaluate that from company to company. So it's very important that the regulators do this, which I think there still is a very important role for citizens, and that citizens must demand that companies be accountable, that all organizations be accountable, government too, for the data that they gather. And they need to demand that this is something that should be regulated. This is currently happening in the United States. For a long time, very little was done with regard to privacy. The law stagnated for a while until in California, a ballot initiative sparked a very powerful law in California to address this issue. And the most important thing I think about this whole thing was it showed the voice of the people. The people came to the polls and voted overwhelmingly to approve the ballot initiative and make a statement to uh, to the government saying, you know, we really want more protection here. And as a result, more states are considering similar laws. So it sparked something. So I think it's very important that consumers stand up and say, "Hey, you know, this is something that we need to get under control." Just like we want to know that if we buy a product, it's not going to, you know, burst into flames. If we go to the supermarket, we buy something at the supermarket, it's not going to be poisonous and kill us. It's going to be safe. And the government plays a role there. And if things, you know, we buy stuff and, you know, everything in the supermarket starts to be tainted and starts to make us ill or kill people, we would certainly say, hey, you know, this can't stand anymore. We need to do something. And so I think that's what people need to do, to say, look, you know, this is what's happening with our data. There are some problems and we need controls so that we are protected.
You talked there about how the role of voters, literally voting with their feet in this space and demanding change. So I'd like to finish, if I may, on with something of an optimistic note, I hope. So what are your hopes for the future, a global future in respect of data protection and privacy now?
Well, I think that there have been a lot of, you know, good developments. Obviously, there are new challenges as technology is marching at a very rapid pace. But we've seen a tremendous development of privacy law since I started in the field. I mean, when I started, it was just around the time of the um, EU Data Protection Directive. And then, of course, uh, a few years ago, we have the GDPR, which I think is a wonderful law. It has inspired a lot of other laws around the world. There are privacy laws in something like around 140 countries around the world now. This activity has increased dramatically over the last 2 decades. The amount of law out there is, I think, pretty robust compared to what it was when I started. And the other thing I think that's really interesting and gives me some hope is that there are a lot of things where we're almost would be considered non-starters that now are becoming the norm. An example is the right to delete. Certainly in the United States, that would have been considered totally out of the norm. And now, you know, a lot of privacy of the new privacy laws have it. Um, a new example that I see just recently is regulation of dark patterns. The California law has a regulation to restrict dark patterns. Dark patterns are manipulative designs that try to trick people, deceive people, or make it really hard to make the proper privacy settings that someone wants to make. So if someone wants to exercise a privacy right, you know, a dark pattern would make it really difficult, would bury that in a really hard to find place on the website. And now there is regulation of this. And a number of the privacy bills also have a dark patterns regulation. And for a long time, especially in the United States, where there's a very much of a laissez-faire attitude of, oh my gosh, we shouldn't regulate design. You know, technological design is not the business of government. We need to not do it. All of a sudden, you know, dark pattern seems to be okay to regulate, which actually is regulation of design. It's exactly regulation of privacy by design, but it's it's a, it's now becoming the norm. So we're seeing a movement, I think a worldwide movement toward greater protection, toward an acceptance of more regulation, and a movement toward the GDPR. The US is moving closer to the GDPR than Europe has not moved closer to the US. The US has moved closer to Europe, which I think is a great thing. So that gives me hope that the direction of um, the law is trying to catch up.
Very interesting. I wish I had a lot more time to speak with you, Daniel, because it's fascinating to hear your perspectives. But I think it's important that we all know that we have a lot of work to do, but we're going in the right direction generally. It's been an enormous pleasure to hear your thoughts. As I said, I wish I had hours more with you. We're really looking forward to getting that new book on our bookshelves. We have a small but perfectly formed bookshelf in our office, so it will be added to there as soon as it arrives. So thank you so much, Professor Solove, for your time and your thoughts. They've been fantastic. It's been really good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.